Hey guys, my name is Alex. So today we're going to do a tutorial on importing a Photoshop file into After Effects, mainly because we want to be able to animate a Photoshop file, but I want to see how After Effects treats certain layers inside of Photoshop once you import it. So this is obviously a pretty terrible design of what's going on, but I just wanted to lay a few different elements into a Photoshop document with different styles and treatments to see just how After Effects takes those in and translates those. So we have linked files, we have smart objects, we have text layers with layer styles on them. We have some little angels here that are separated in different ways. So we have over here, you can see we have, I'm kind of labeling these so I will know what was really a part of these layers once we import those. I have an adjustment layer in here to see how After Effects takes that. We have the smart object, these little Polaroids, one's a smart object and one is a linked file. And then we have an angel, and this is with the clipping mask on the actual layer. So if I open up this folder, we have this angel layer, which is a smart object. So it's a part of a really high res. If I double click on this, you'll see it's a pretty high res image of this angel. But it has a clipping mask on there, so I wanted to see how that affects it. Then we have this color overlay actually on that same layer. And then we have another group where the clipping mask is actually on the folder versus the actual angel. So we're going to see how it reacts to that. And then we have this just a texture in the background that has been rasterized, and it has a blending mode of color burn. We have a shape layer back here, and then this background, we actually don't really need that one. So I wanted to just throw these in here to see how After Effects takes these in. The thing that I do whenever I'm taking a design is I want to make sure that it is really organized. This isn't obviously that organized just because I want to use this as an experiment, but if I was going to be importing a design or something, I want to get it as organized as possible, putting it in all the folders that it can. So let me open up one example really quick here. Let me find it really quickly. So for this summer here, this best summer ever, I want to open up this design. So this is a recent series we did, but everything is in a folder, you can see, and it's all labeled. I've deleted really any layers that I don't need, that are just maybe taking up space or something that they're just going to get in the way and confuse me. So I tried to label everything as best I can and put it all into a folder so that it's nice and organized. So that would be my first tip, and then we got to figure out how is it going to react to some of these things. So let's dive into After Effects and see how it takes in this design here. So I'm going to go into After Effects, and once you open it up, you'll probably see this window here. I'm just going to click over here and import a file. So I'm going to do Control-I to import, and this is my Photoshop to AE little test document here. So I'm going to click on that, and this little dialog box is going to pop up, and this is just asking you how do you want After Effects to see this. So you have a couple of options. You have footage, and this is what you would use really just for like a single file. So images or a video or something like that, you would just do footage. It really probably wouldn't even ask you this for a single file, but this is just saying, do you want me to take your Photoshop file and just smash it down to basically like a JPEG? We don't want to do that. We want pieces. The other option is the composition, and this is good. I mean, this takes the layers, all the layers you have, and splits them up and adds them as layers in After Effects. But if you have any images that are sort of going off the screen, so for instance, if you have, if I had this angel, or maybe one of these pictures here, if I had it over here, it's going to basically clip this image to this canvas size. So it wouldn't realize that there's more images, there's more to this image on the outside. So if that doesn't bother you, then that's totally fine, but I would prefer to try to keep as much as I can a part of the project. So I wouldn't do composition. I would do composition, retain layer sizes, so that it sees what that actual each layer is made up of. So if this image was outside of here, it would recognize that this layer goes past the canvas size for our Photoshop document. Okay, so the other option we have is these layer options. You have editable layer styles and merge layer styles into footage. I would suggest keeping it editable layer styles, and this just means that if you have any layer styles added to your layers, for instance, if I have this tutorial text right here, and I have this layer style on here, and the layer styles are, if you double click on any layer, you're going to get this little dialog box that pops up, and these are all your layer styles. So bevels and strokes and drop shadows and stuff like that will all be are all your layer styles. So if you have any of these applied and you want to have the ability to edit them inside of After Effects, then you want to make sure you keep editable layer styles. But if you don't, if you click on this, then it will sort of apply those layer styles to your layer, and you won't be able to edit those. So we'll go through that in a bit, but this is what I would suggest doing. So composition, retain layer sizes, and editable layer styles. So then I'm going to hit OK. It's going to drop in a little comp here, as well as all the layers that are contained here. And then it doesn't really like to organize this too much. It just kind of throws all these pieces in there. But so try not to look at this a whole lot. We're going to jump into this little comp that it made. So I'm going to double click on this, and this is our document size in here. So now we can sort of see how it has imported these pieces into here. So it really turns everything into just a Photoshop file. So what I really wanted to figure out was if I have really high-res images inside of Photoshop, then would those translate to where I could scale them up really big to where they would keep their quality. So for instance, if I go back here and I have this linked file that's going to this this Polaroid here, and I want to scale this up or scale it down, it's gonna keep the quality pretty solid. Probably same thing with these angels over here. So let's see, they're all smart objects, so they should scale up pretty well. So let me click and scale this up and see what happens if I hit enter. So yeah, it's pulling that information from that smart object, so that quality stays really big. So if I were to animate this in or fly a camera into it, then I would hope that it would keep this quality. Problem is, it doesn't. So if I go into After Effects, no matter what version I have, if I scale these up, it just doesn't realize that. So you can also see that this angel that had the clipping mask on the folder did not import very well. So it didn't really even recognize that clipping mask at all. So that method doesn't work. Smart layers or clipping mask would need to be on the actual layer that you're wanting to clip. So I'm probably just going to turn this one off altogether. But if you can see, if I try to scale this angel up, right here, it's going to fall apart as far as the quality goes. So if I'm pretty close, that is just doesn't look very good. So that's a problem. Mainly it's really a problem if I'm wanting to zoom in or anything like that. If you're just wanting to maybe do a subtle shift or something in the design, it's probably no big deal. But personally, I like to make, especially with a really intricate design or has a bunch of layers, I want to add some depth to it and have the camera just have the freedom to fly around a little bit. So that doesn't work. So let's see what else I could do for this option. Let me come back here. So let's go into this layer and let's play around with some of the things that it did here. So here's our angel layer. It's kind of all by itself here. Now if you hit U on the keyboard twice, it will show the layer styles that are applied to that to the layer. So like I said earlier, with that option where you can keep the editable layer styles or merge those layer styles into the actual layer to where you can't edit them. If we were to do that, we wouldn't have the option to go in here and change this around. So if I wanted to come in here and change the color, then I could. So again, keeping those editable layer styles would be super helpful. But again, like we talked about, our angel is sort of falling apart here. So how could we fix this? Really, the only option would be to have this layer somewhere else. So like we talked about, this was a linked, maybe a linked layer or some sort of smart object. So let's see, this was the one we had. If I double click on this is right here. So I need to find this angel PSB or this smart layer. So unless you have this saved somewhere else, maybe you have this like in sort of assets folder or something, then you would probably want to save this out as a high-res angel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this as high-res angel. Let's just call it that. Okay, so I'm going to throw that, we'll just throw it on the desktop for now. Again, I would put this in some sort of organized folder, but just for this example, I'm just gonna save it as is. And it does a large document format. I think that's fine, or you can change it to PSD, but I'm just gonna trust that it needs to be this. So I'm just gonna hit save, and now we have that angel somewhere else that we can reference to. So I'm gonna go back to After Effects, and I want to tell After Effects that to reference that layer versus the one from the original Photoshop file, that from this one here. So don't reference this one, but reference this one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to After Effects, and in order to find this, I could go into this folder and try to figure out which one it is, but we had a couple angels in here, and if you have a bunch of layers, then this might be hard to find. So what you can do is just click on your layer down here, right click, and I'm going to go to reveal the layer source in this project. So if I click that, it's going to let me click off of that. So if I'm right here and I want to figure out where this angel is, I can right click, reveal layer source in project. If I click on that, it'll say, hey, it's right here. I can then right click on this and go to replace footage, file, and we're going to go click on the desktop. So the PSB, this high res angel, there it is right there. So I'm going to click on that. This is basically saying this is a Photoshop file of some sort. We can say choose layer angel because there's only one layer in there. So that's fine. We can do that. And I can hit OK. So it's going to make that super big. So now if you have a big intricate design, you may have to do a lot of resizing and whatnot because it would throw off your original design. But now you have the freedom to really zoom in and get close to this design and make it work. So now you can scale up, scale down pretty good based on that high res PSB file that we made. So it's sort of a task. I mean, this can be time consuming if you're having to do that, but I really don't know any other way that I've never discovered one. If you know one, please let me know, but I'm not sure of any other way to tell After Effects that, hey, this was a smart object or a linked file inside of that AE file without just going in here, right clicking and saying replace footage and linking it together. So, that's sort of an issue, but it is what it is, and that's just what we have to do. So that's why it really helps to keep it nice and organized. So let's talk about what else it did to some of these things. Let's turn off these layer masks or these little angels here. So again, yeah, that layer mask on the folder there just did not work. And also whenever you have a folder inside of Photoshop, so these little angels were inside of some folders, it just basically makes that into a pre-comp. So we'll talk about that in a little bit when I import another project, but you can see it made it into a pre-comp, and I can double click on that and go into the different layers that were a part of it. Layers with some layer styles and one that's just sort of plain. Problem is we can't edit these. So these were text layers inside of Photoshop, but it just throws it in here as a Photoshop file and you can't edit it. But let's mess around with a couple options of how you can edit it. So the first one is you can go into your Photoshop file and we can update that text layer. So if I change this to my name, click off that, and if I save it and I go back to After Effects, it should update that. Boom, right there. So that was pretty helpful. That was pretty quick. As long as you keep your all your stuff together, then it should find that pretty well. If for some reason things get out of place or you move things around or rename them, then it can't find them, you could then right click. So if I go to right here, it renamed it right there, but I could right click and go to replace footage and file, and I would click on the main Photoshop file that I'm using, and then this little dialog box will pop up and it'll ask you what layer from that Photoshop file do you want to replace that with. So you click on choose layer, and I'm gonna go down to where this layer is now. It's called Alex. I'm gonna click on that, and you have a couple options. You can do the layer size or the document size. If you do the document size, it's going to do it based on that 1920 by 1080 size that we have, or you can do the layer size. So if you move this around and you click document size, it'll move it. So you just have to maybe move that back. But if you click on layer size, it will update it just based on that layer, which is probably the better option. So that's one option to edit your text. I think you can also let's try it with this one. Let's right click on this layer, tutorial with layer styles, and if you go to create convert to editable text, I think in most cases it will turn this into a text layer. So let's click on it and see what happens. So yeah, it made it a text layer. So now I can click on that and type in some text as well. So that's pretty cool. And it also has those layer styles in there. So if I hit U twice, we have that drop shadow on there that I could then turn off or change the color or whatever, just like the layer styles inside of Photoshop. So that's pretty cool. All right, so we went through that. That's pretty fun stuff. Then we have the adjustment layer. So this basically, if I was gonna do an adjustment layer inside of After Effects, I would go to composition, layer, new, adjustment layer. And this is great if you're going to be adding any sort of color correction or something, or an overall blur or whatever to your entire document or a certain layer. So I'm going to click on adjustment layer, and then I could go to effect and add some color correction. Let's see, throw on some curves, and then play around with the adjustment layer. So that would be one way to do it if you didn't have any inside of Photoshop. But Photoshop basically makes this PSD little layer here into its own adjustment layer. So it translates the curves from Photoshop into the curves from After Effects. So it gives you the same controls. So as long as those adjustment layers are in Photoshop that are also in After Effects, then it translates pretty well. So that's pretty fun. We can go into, let's see, the link files and smart objects. We already talked about how to update those. And again, you would just want to link those. If you're going to be scaling them up, you'd want to link them to a separate PSD file. It also pulls in this shadow that I have on there. So if I go back to that Photoshop file we have inside of the smart objects, it doesn't really separate those. But if I wanted to edit those in Photoshop, I could double click on this. That's not it. Let me go back. This linked file, open up this one, and I have the shadows in there, so I could turn that off. And I guess I could do that and hit save, and maybe let's go back to our Photoshop file. That drop shadow's gone. Then I'd want to save that file. I'd go back to After Effects, and it updates right there. So that's one way to do it, but you may want to just add all the drop shadow type stuff inside of After Effects, or have those layers separated inside your main Photoshop file. Okay, so let's see, we have the rasterized background back there. So this was again just a JPEG texture that I have a blending mode on, and it translates those blending modes right there. So you could then try some different options if you wanted to do that. The shape layer comes through just as a flat layer. It doesn't really come through as a shape layer. I don't believe. Usually if you click on that, let's see. Yeah, it doesn't recognize that as a shape layer. It almost just recognizes it as a solid color. We don't need that background anymore. So yeah, it puts a mask on it like it's a shape layer, but it's not really. So if I double click on it, yeah, it's really just a shape layer. So maybe, let's see. Let me go back. Yeah, it's almost like it's just a JPEG, so there's really nothing you can change. So let's see, if I right click, maybe I could do create. No. Yeah, so if you wanted that to be like a shape layer, where in Photoshop I could just double click on this, change that color pretty instantly. It doesn't recognize that inside of After Effects, which is kind of a bummer, but that's a pretty easy fix. You could go to layer styles, color overlay, or you could add a fill effect on there or something, but then you can go in and change all of your colors right there. So it's basically just a flat layer that you can't do anything with. Okay, so that really about covers everything. All these layers can be animated. You can go in here, and all the parameters are still the same. So you have your scale and position, set your different keyframes and whatnot. And there you could turn them. You can make them a 3D layer as well. You may just have to move some anchor points or something around, but all that translates pretty well. Another thing is when you make, which we'll get into this in a minute, but when you have a folder, it adds this little star option in here, and this is basically the actual term for it is collapse transformations for vector layers continuously rasterized. Basically, all that just means is it's going to reference everything that's inside of that composition. So if you don't have that turned on, it will see this sort of as a flat object. So if I had multiple layers inside of this folder, and they were 3D layers, I would want to make sure I turned that on so it understood that there were a bunch of layered files inside of this folder. That's sort of complicated, but if you're starting to run into issues, actually a great example would be if I had this text here. Let me turn this this drop shadow off. But if I had this text right here, and let me move my anchor point. So since it's just a text layer within this main composition, I can pull this super close to the camera without having any sort of loss of quality, right? So it's pretty crisp, and I'm not losing any quality no matter how big I get. But if I were to throw this, let me undo that. If I were to throw this inside of a composition, so I would pre-compose it. So I'm doing Shift Command C, and I'm just going to say text, and I hit OK. And then that little button right there is not turned on. So now if I make this a 3D layer and I want to scale it up, the closer I get, you can see it starting to fall apart. But if I click on this little star, it's going to recognize that, oh, there's a text layer in here, and that text layer should be able to scale up. So if I click on this little option, now it's super big and it's off the screen. But let's see if I can bring it back. So if I bring it back some, you can see now I can get right up on it and it's nice and crisp. So that's a great way to be able to zoom into certain layers. So it will only be as big as your layer is. So for instance, that angel we brought in, it's not just going to make it infinitely scalable, but it'll scale it. It'll keep its quality. So anyways, there's more to that, but we won't get into that, but that's just what the little star means. So there are probably tons of other little nuances inside of Photoshop, like adding filters or different things like that, that may affect how it is translated in After Effects that you can experiment with. But this is really just sort of the basic things that I've come across and that I've had to learn with trial and error and trying to get layers to be just right. So now we've gone through that. Hopefully that was helpful, but let's go through. I'm just going to throw a Photoshop file in here that is already designed and organized and ready to go, and see what I need to do to change it. I mean, every time I do that, there's always some little thing that I need to adjust, but let's throw it in there and let's do a quick little run through of animation and see what we can come up with. So I'm going to delete all of these files here. Don't need these anymore. And so I have a new composition. So I'm going to import this design here. And again, this is just a sort of a lot of the little pieces that we've already talked about. We have some text layers in here. We have some smart layers in here. We have some textures and things like that. So again, I've gotten everything organized. We have some adjustment layers up here, all in a folder by themselves. Some overlays and textures that we'll look at in just a bit. And so yeah, once everything is again nice and organized, let's save it and import it into After Effects. So I'm going to go to After Effects, and again, I'm going to go through this animation stuff pretty quickly because I don't want to spend too much time on all the little small step-by-step things. I really just want to cover a quick start to finish. The overall idea of this project was just to show you what After Effects does to some Photoshop files. So now we're going to just sort of do a recap and do some quick animation. So I'm going to import my PSD. It's going to ask me this little option here. I want to do retain layer sizes, and I want to keep those editable layer styles. Let's hit OK. That'll import all my little pieces. Again, all my Photoshop layers and things are in this folder. So now I'm going to go into this composition that it created and double click on that. And now we have our big thing here. A couple of things that I'm running into right away is that it's missing some texture that is on the actual document. So there's some texture over here that is, you can see that is on this text. Let's see if I can zoom in here. We'll get there. So you can see there's some extra little sort of grunginess on that text, and so I want to be able to apply that. And what's happening is I don't think it quite recognized that there was maybe some clipping mask on that. So let's go in here and take a look. So yeah, so there's a clipping mask on top of that folder, which we talked about doesn't quite translate very well inside of After Effects. And that's okay. We'll figure this one out in just a minute. So I think what I'm going to do, instead of applying it to my layer, I want to make this a black and white textured file that I can then apply to my text inside of After Effects, so that it's not locked into that look. All right. So the way I'm going to do that is I think I'm going to make a new layer inside of Photoshop really quick. I'm going to make it white, and I'm going to drag this big box right here. And we'll throw this up here at the very top. I'm just making this real quick. I don't want it in the color correction. I want it in the very top. There we go. And I'm going to apply this clipping mask to that layer. And so now there you see some grunginess on there, and it's sort of coming through the main design is coming through that white. And now I just want to make another layer and make this black. And this isn't really part of what I wanted to do, but I'm just showing you what I'm going to do really quickly here. I didn't want that to happen. I want to make a new layer. Let's see. Drag a new box here. Put this below it. I'm going to make this black. So I'm just making a quick little textured layer. So again, I made a black rectangle in the background. I grabbed the clipping mask that was on that text and drug it up there by holding down, clicking on it, holding down Option, and dragging it to that new white layer. So now I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And we'll call this grunge overlay. Just throw that in there for now. I'm I'm gonna make this a JPEG, and we're gonna tell it inside of After Effects that whatever is white, I want you to keep, and whatever is black, I want you to remove. And we'll get into all that in a bit. It's basically a clipping mask inside of After Effects. All right, back to After Effects. It didn't apply that very well, so let's go into our title and tagline, and you can see that it's, you know, it's nice and clean, but I don't want it to be that clean, so I'm gonna import that file we just made, grunge overlay, and I'm gonna drag it down here. So now I have this grunginess right on top here, and I can move this around. So I want this to apply to this entire pre-comp. So we're gonna click on toggle switches and modes, and I'm going to make this a clipping mask of this. So I'm gonna do Luma matte. All right, now we can see we have some grunginess on this text, and that's what we want. All right, so I could probably even go in and add an adjustment layer. Let's see, let's go to color correction and levels. And I wanna really try to get some more darkness into those black specks we have. So now you can see there's even more coming through right there. So that's kind of cool. All right, that works. Let's keep that for now. And let's go into, we have our color correction. We can leave all this. So if you go into this one, you have that selective color. We can just leave that for now. The overlays and textures, again, they're all being applied the way they should be because this is turned on. So it's understanding that all of these are inside of here, and they're just different layers, and they all have different blending modes, and so it's understanding all of these blending modes. If that was turned off, if this was turned off, it would end up being a mess and wouldn't blend it the right way. So it's sort of just like making a group. We have our palm tree down here, which we'll get into a bit. We have the Polaroids, and we have the lines and the background back there. So let's just do some real simple animation on some of this stuff. So let's go into the lines. Let's mess with this a little bit. And so this comes in as this was a linked layer or maybe a smart object inside of the Photoshop document, and it's just making it all one, and that's fine. It was maybe a linked Illustrator file, so we could change the colors. But for this, we're just gonna leave this as is and add a shape layer to this where it sort of animates on, and then we'll do the same thing that we did with the grunge overlay. We'll make it like a clipping mask. I'm going to click on G for my shape or my pen tool. I'm gonna click somewhere up here, and then I'm gonna click somewhere down here. And I wanna try to get it right in the middle there. So now it makes this nice thick line, and you can adjust the size of this line by, let's go maybe here, just the size of this line by this option right up there. Okay, so it looks good. Problem is it's square right here, which is pretty boring. So I'm gonna go into my shape layer options, and we're gonna go to contents, shape layer, stroke, and we want to change it to the cap from butt to round. So now we got a nice round line. So it gives a little more of a style to it, a little vintage style. So this looks good. And then now we can, let's do a little animation. So I'm going to go into my content, shape layer, path, click the path right there. So I want the final path to be up here. So I'm gonna hit G on the keyboard so I can move that little point. I want it to be off the screen like that. Come back here, and I'm gonna move it all the way down. Pretty much put it right on top of that original point. And I don't want this to be 15 seconds. I want this to be like 3 seconds. Let me zoom into a little bit. Pull this down here. Okay. I want to make these easy ease so that it sort of flies in and flies out. And again, I'm going through this pretty fast because this tutorial is not really, this is more just an additional piece to it. So you can see that it flies in. So you can right click and do keyframe assistant and then easy ease. And then you can do your graph editor and adjust those little points on there. If you don't see that, you can go to the speed. You want to click on speed graph versus value graph. But this basically just makes it sort of go fast and then go really slow. That looks pretty good. And what I could do really is I could just take this, and I want to make this shape layer the same color as this right here. So this maybe would be a better option to give me some editing capability. So I'm going to click on this little stroke box right here that's showing me the color I want it to be. So I'm gonna click on the eyedropper tool and then click that dark purple, and now it makes it that color, so that looks good. So then I'm gonna duplicate this shape layer, and we're just gonna move it. I'm just gonna click and move it over to this side here. Line it up with that blue one, and now I'm going to change this color to green. So again, this sort of defeats the purpose of the Photoshop file, but sometimes it's just, you discover easier ways to do things and get the job done. So You just have to experiment. It's always going to be a little bit different based on what your design is. There we go. So I actually did, I've recorded this once, this tutorial, and then realized this is pointless because I was editing this actual document, and I'm like, man, they're all going to be different no matter what your design is, so that's not going to be very helpful. And so I wanted to go through the different types of layers that After Effects, or that you can do in Photoshop, and see how After Effects reacts to them. Okay, so now we have our animated lines here. Let's turn off our background. They're flying in. I don't like that they're all moving at the same time, so we could maybe throw these in here a little randomly like this. That looks perfect. So again, they all had keyframes on them already, so I just sort of adjusted them in time, and now they move much more sort of organically. Okay, so now we can go back to the main document, and I could duplicate this grunge layer, and I can put it on top of our lines, because now you can see our lines are pretty clean. They have some texture on there from the background, but we could go and add a little more by doing the same thing we did with the title and tag. So I'm gonna click on toggle switches, and with the grunge overlay on top of the lines, I'm going to click on lines and go to Luma Matte. So now we get a little more texture on there, and I can probably scale this up. Oops, I don't want to scale up my lines. I want to scale up the grunge overlay. Something like that. So basically, again, it's saying anything that is black on this image will be removed from the layer below it, and anything that was white will be visible, much like clipping mask inside of Photoshop. Okay, so we got a nice little animation there with these lines. That looks good. And we can mess with the title maybe. So let's go into the title and tagline, double click on this. So we have our main title here. So this was designed in Photoshop with a bunch of layers sort of distributed in different space. So we have our main title. Let me turn this extrude off. So you have our main title here, and then you have the same title back here, and it's duplicated a lot of times, and then sort of distributed in a row to get that 3D effect. That's going to be a little sort of a problem inside of Photoshop, so maybe we'll have to recreate that a little bit. So, or sorry, After Effects, so we'll have to recreate it. So let's go here and see what we can do. Tagline, we'll just ignore that for now. Main title, let's go in here and see what we're working with. And our extrude layer, so if I turn this off, you can see there's our text right there. So let me double click on this. So now we have all these copies right here. And I think I'm just going to ignore that for now. Let's mess around with it and see what we can come up with. So let's see. Let's click on text. Let's go into text here. Here's this title right here. I don't think, see, here's an example where I don't think I can right click on this and do create convertible, convert to text. Yeah, it doesn't quite find it because this is actually a smart layer. So that's not really going to work. That's okay. We'll leave that for now. Let's do, if I did want to update it, I would do it through the Photoshop file like we talked about. I'd go into here, double click on this, edit this file, and see if it updates. So it would probably update the entire thing with the extrude and all. So let's give it a shot. So let's make best. Maybe we'll just make this say greatest. Greatest. We might could scale it down a little bit. All right, let's hit enter and we'll save it. Let's go back to our After Effects file and let's see if it updates. Actually, I got to go into the Photoshop file, the original. Where'd it go? This one here. It updates here, but you have to also save this document. So I'm going to do save. And we'll go back to our After Effects file and let's see if it updates. Boom. That's awesome. So now our extrude updated, our greatest updated, and that is all looking pretty cool. So how can we animate this? Let's do something a little bit different. Let's do the extrude. And let's see. Let's maybe have this come in from down here instead of following those lines. Let's just have some fun with it. Let's see. So I'm going to click on the extrude. Let's actually move both of these. I'm going to click on both of these. I'm going to hit T on the keyboard. No, I'm going to hit P on the keyboard for my position. Click on a position keyframe. Let me zoom in some. So we have, we're going to do probably over 3 seconds, 2.5. And I'm going to move this down here. All right. Then I'm going to do a little easy ease on these. So again, you can right click, go to keyframe assistant, easy ease, and I'm going to highlight this point so that it's saying that it starts off slow, goes really fast, and then slows down to a crawl. So let's do a quick render of that. Flies in there, looks pretty good. Okay, so that looks good. Now let's do something a bit different. Let's pull in those colors that we were messing with. Let me find that layer. Let's see, I guess it was called lines. Let's find it here. Grunge overlay text lines right there. I'm just gonna drag this in. I'm just gonna reference this for color. I'll just put this to the side. Okay, so I'm going to take the extrude layer and I'm gonna duplicate it. And I'm gonna do a color overlay. So layer, styles, color overlay. And we will make this color this purple. So then we're gonna duplicate it again. I'm gonna hit U on the keyboard twice so it shows all my parameters. I'm gonna do the blue. We're gonna duplicate it again. Double click U and select this white. Duplicate U twice. Take that color, duplicate U twice, take that color and get that red in there. All right, so now let's mess around with it. Now we have our colors. I can turn this off for now. I don't need that. And then I'm going to sort of offset these a little bit. Not by too much, but just a little bit. I do want to keep them fairly even. So let's just see what we're working with here. Let me just pull this quality down some. So now we're getting sort of a summery vibe here. I wonder if I need to switch these around. I think that's what I'm going for. Let's see. Yeah, so it kind of gives sort of a VHS logo animation thing going on. I love it. I think that works great. I kind of wish I'd have done that for the original project, but still pretty cool. Let's go back here and see what we got going on. So it's gonna fly in. So we'll render this out in a little bit. Just want to see what we're dealing with here. So we have a little issue down here, and that's because the grunge overlay is a little small. It kind of got moved around. That was my bad. I moved it around. So I just need to move that around. So the layer wasn't quite as big as the comp size, so it wasn't clipping it out. So that looks good. Okay, I would probably will make our lines come in first, and then our title would come in after that. So I'm just going to move both of these down a little bit. So the lines come in, and then we want our title to follow right after that, and then we'll do the pictures in a bit. So with the palm tree, we can do some editing. So in here, I probably, let's see, it has the little star checked, so let's move it around. But you can see it's cutting off this line right here. That's it's cutting off this palm branch, but I'm pretty sure that palm branch is actually there. So let me go into this file and see what the problem is. So right now you can see this one isn't checked because you have to go all the way down to the very bottom to where there's no more pre-comps. So in here, you're not going to have the star because there's no more pre-comps. But the problem is there's not a star on this one. So if I move this out, I'm cutting that leaf off. But if I tell it, hey, there's more to that layer that I want to see, if I click here and now I move it up, you can see that the rest of the leaf is there. All right, so we can do our animation. We can actually go back to the tutorial main composition here and do our animation inside of here, I believe. So what I want to do is move my anchor point down to where the sort of the bottom of the palm tree would be, somewhere around here. So I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard, click that little cross point, that's the anchor point right here. Drag it down somewhere around there is fine. And we'll do a simple rotation. So I'm going to hit R on the keyboard, and that's going to show the rotation parameter. So I can click on the stopwatch, and that just means it's going to lock this rotation right where that keyframe is. So I want that to be probably one of the last things that kind of pop up. So we'll do it somewhere around in here. Then I'll come down here to maybe 3 seconds, and we will rotate this palm tree to the right. So now you can see that it's rotating from that anchor point, but if it was up here, it would rotate from that anchor point, which that would look silly. So I'm going to pull this all the way down. So what I want to do is I want it to sort of pop in and then bounce back and forth. So the way I'm going to do that is figure out this is at 0. So I'm going to need to extend my rotation this way. So I'm going to keep track with my numbers. So let's do a -8. So it's -8 degrees. And so I'm going to pull this in pretty close here. So then we're going to go to a little bit less than that, but on the plus side. So I'm going to do 6. So I'm going back from -8 over to 6. So I'm sort of subtracting 2 every time. So now I can go to -4. And then I can come over here and I can go to 2. And probably put -1 in there, just get the small little incremental adjustment, and then go back to 0. So if I highlight these, maybe do an easy ease on that as well, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and let's see what happens. I'm going to set my brackets to where it just renders right here, and I'm going to drop my quality down so it just renders a bit faster, and let's take a look and see what happens. So it really helps if you do that little adding and subtracting of your rotation. So it pops in, does a little more, it just slowly comes to a stop. There's probably some adjustments you can do if you were to go into the, I'm going to highlight those and click on my graphic editor. You could go in and adjust the speed of some of these rotations and some of these where it stops and starts, and try to get it even a little bit smoother, but you get the idea. So then I'm going to do maybe some stuff to the Polaroids. So I'm going to go into the Polaroids pre-comp, and we can go into these images here, and now we have our Polaroids all separate. But now, like we said, it's not recognizing that these are smart layers. So if I were to click on this and I were to scale it up, it's gonna fall to pieces, right? So that's never good. I don't think I'm going to zoom into these, so I don't have to really worry about like replacing these with the linked files that they actually are. So we'll just leave them as is. But if you did want to go in there, again, you would just follow those steps to where I would right click on this. I would say reveal this layer in our project. This little it changes right there, saying, hey, here's your Polaroid 5. I would right click, go to replace footage file, and then I would find that that linked file, which I believe is somewhere in here, linked files, Polaroid number 5, and I would say, I guess I could just say merge layer. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I could just do that, merge layers, and now it's super big. So if I did want to do that, I could, but we'll just come back for now. So for these, I probably would just do some sort of scale up and rotation on these. So I'm going to do R on the keyboard, and we're just going to keep it simple for now. I would probably do the same technique where it sort of bounces back and forth, but just for time's sake, I'm going to move my anchor point. And I'm doing that by clicking on the layer, and I'm hitting Y on the keyboard for that anchor point tool, or whatever the tool is called up here. And so whatever happens, it's going to happen from that point. So I'd have my rotation, and I'm going to pull this back as well. Let me zoom into this timeline. Again, these should happen really quickly. So I'm going to put my rotation maybe over here. It's going to kind of pop in from behind that text that we have animating on. And then I need to scale. So I'm going to hit scale, or S on the keyboard, make a keyframe. I want this keyframe to be the final scale, and this one to be 0. So it's going to go from 0% to 100% and sort of rotate in. So again, this animation is not going to be that great. I would add a lot more bounce and some finesse to this stuff, but for now, just as a example, we'll do just a little bit. So let's see what we got. So that works. I mean, it's nothing fancy, but you get the picture. So let me go through quickly and do the same thing to these other ones as well. Okay, so I got this pretty much set. I just want to offset these maybe a little bit. So I'm just going to sort of drag these randomly in here. Let's see what happens. So they sort of pop in like that. And again, we would do some fine tuning to that. We could also add some motion blur if you wanted to. I don't think anything else is going to have motion blur, but if you are a fan of motion blur, you could you basically select this little box here with this ball that's moving, and then you turn it on globally right there. So I could turn it off altogether, or I turn it on, and then change these individually. But it adds more render time, but it gives it a tad bit more of a realism to it if you're going for that. So let's go back to here, and this is happening too fast. I'm gonna wait. I want those to happen pretty much right as this text is flying in. So let's then move this entire composition down to like right here maybe. All right, so let's maybe do a short render of this. I don't think there's anything else I would do. In the original design that you can find on Pixel Preacher, we have a film burn on here, so I could throw in a film burn as well. Let's see, film burn. Some stock film burns that I made a long time ago that had some nice effect to it. I drag that in here. I don't want it to be, I want it to do some sort of blending mode on that. Probably add or screen is going to be my go-to for this. Let's do add. I'm going to turn that opacity down maybe to 70%. So let's do a render and see what we have. All right, so the lines come in, the title comes in, those flip out. It's looking pretty good. The tree does its little thing. So this just gives you an idea of how to take a Photoshop file and go in and tweak it to your heart's content to do something pretty cool with it. Now we could, again, you would want to, we could probably go in and change some of these photos. So for instance, if you, the cool thing about having these Photoshop files in here is if we're like, I don't really like this bus, I could go into my document and I could go find that, let's see, Polaroids, images, let's see, Polaroid number 5. So I'm going to double click on this linked file and we could put in any photo we want in here. So let me drag in a new photo. Actually, I think I have one in here. So if we wanted to put maybe this one there instead, is then I could save this document, go back to my main Photoshop file that we're editing in After Effects, save that, because you can see it's been updated right there, and then it can go back to After Effects and give it a minute and see if it'll update that file. And boom, there it goes. Same thing goes with the title. We could go into our series title. Like I say, this has been the lamest summer ever. I don't think I spelled that right. Maybe that's right. I can hit save and go back to my main tutorial here and save that. And go back to the After Effects file and it should update there as well. Boom. It's got the extrude on there. Everything looks right. And that is spot on. So pretty cool. Last thing we could do is throw in that tagline. So I could go in here and we have our tagline. So I could just do a position on that. Fly this down here. Easy ease. Boom. Probably do a lot shorter than that. It's gonna come flying in. And this would probably be the last thing that would come in to our design. Somewhere around in there. Right after. Okay, so that's about it. I think everything has been animated and ready to go. So I hope this was helpful. I know I flew through this second part of this tutorial just to show you how you could go in and edit your files and quickly update them and save them. So that there's, you know, if you got to this process and your client or the pastor, whoever that you were working with, like, I don't really like this photo, then you could quickly update that versus, you know, saving it as a PNG inside of Photoshop and then importing it and all that good stuff. So this makes it a little bit easier to animate and save and tweak. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully you can apply this to your next project and we will see you on the next one.